Hi everybody. I wanted to bring something up to you that we haven't talked about yet, and that is other ways to think about volunteers in kind of a much bigger picture. We have been thinking about volunteers as individuals. We have thought about them as people that we can engage to further our mission, and we've thought about finding the right fit for each individual based on the right job that we have defined before we even go looking for our volunteers, and we've developed their job descriptions, and we've been talking about recruiting them, we've talked about managing them, integrating them with staff, rewarding and appreciating them, and supervising them. Now I want to back off of thinking about volunteers as individual people and talk a little bit about the roles that volunteers can play, and in particular when we think about growing our nonprofit. And I'm a little bit sick, so you'll just have to forgive me here. My voice is a little gravelly. When we think about growing our nonprofit, if, for example, we have a soup kitchen and we are feeding 100 people a day, but we know that there are 750 homeless people in our community, then what we want to do is we want to get to where we can scale up in one way or another, whatever is the best way to do that, so that we make sure that nobody goes without food, right? So I want to talk about different kinds of capital, different ways of looking at volunteers as capital that can help you scale up. And now I'm not talking so much about individuals, but rather ways to engage individuals beyond the actual job description. So for those of you who have heard of the book Bowling Alone, what we know that Bowling Alone stood for is that more and more people are disconnecting. They're not joining as much. They are not joining bowling leagues, but they're also not joining civic functions, churches, political parties, and so forth. But the joining of people and the networking and the relationships that they develop are actually very useful tool. In communities, all those networks and relationships give the communities resilience, because if something goes wrong, you have a lot of helping hands. It's kind of like if your barn burns down, all of your neighbors come and help you put one back up. It's the same for nonprofit organizations. When you have social capital, and I'm not talking necessarily only about when something bad happens, but also when you want to lift off to the next level, sometimes you can use your social capital to help you. So I've given you a picture of a tree, and each of the leaves clusters looks like different people, but you could also think about those as not only individuals, but as institutions and organizations. Your social capital is all of the institutions and organizations that you have a connection with in your organization. But it's more than that. Let's take the case of one of my students in the face-to-face class who actually does have a nonprofit, and it is a Native American Miss America pageant. And she happens to have scholarship money coming from some casinos that are on reservations that she has developed relationships with. So those casinos are part of her own personal social capital in that she has those relationships. But if you really want to lever your social capital, you want to begin to lever not only your own relationships, but the relationships of your relationships. So in this case, she has the casinos, and if we were going to make a list of all of the casinos' relationships, and we're not because it would take too long, but let me just rattle off a few. Entertainers. Casinos usually have a lot of entertainment going on. Food purveyors and chefs and customers at the casino. I'm not sure what all we could include on that list, but if you made the list of the casinos, all of those different stakeholders of the casino could make a relationship, a contact with for the pageant if she asked them to do so, and that would give her enhanced social capital. In this regard, organizations become volunteers if you ask them to help you, and it's actually the individuals inside the organizations that say yes. But on a lower level, you could also think about individuals you might not think about being able to help you, who in fact could. If you wanted to get a bunch of people to attend, you might go to somebody who you knew who was in each of the tribes that was participating in the pageant and ask them to reach out to their own networks. And even though that's not at the higher business level that we just been talking about, that would be a grassroots utilization of your social network's social network. You reach out to people you know, and they reach out to other people they know. So again, this is more of a use of volunteers that we think about scaling up and not so much individual positions. The next kind of capital I'm just going to mention very briefly, because this is the one that we've talked about, is human capital. That's human beings plugged in. In the case of the student in the other class who has the Miss USA Native American pageant, they actually have 40 volunteers. It's interesting to me because they have 12 to 15 actual contestants every year, and yet it takes 40 volunteers to run the event. What she'd really like to do, because right now they're giving out one scholarship, a couple of smaller gifts to the runners-up, and the rest of the young women get nothing. And there are hundreds of thousands of young Native American women who might actually want to participate in this. And when she wants to scale up, not so much because she wants a huge pageant or she wants multiple pageants, but because she wants to make the opportunity for scholarships available to more. So we talked about scaling up with social capital. She would also have to scale up with human capital. If she, for example, held 4 regional pageants, like we hold state Miss America pageants, and then funneled all the regional winners into a single national pageant, she would probably need many more volunteers than she already has, but she might also want to convert some of those volunteers to actual employees. I'm not going to talk too much about this because when we're talking human capital here like this, we're talking about what we have been talking about all semester, identifying the roles that you need filled, developing the job descriptions, and recruiting for them. So let's move on to our next kind of capital. The next kind of capital is political capital. And when we're talking political capital, we're not necessarily talking about the kind of politics that we see in the news every day. We're talking more about the kind of politics that we see in offices, office politics, but probably inter-organization instead of intra-organization. So in her case, she's got a little bit of politics going on. It turns out that there are 2 other Native American pageants, and there's a little bit of conflict and drama having to do with the fact that she's competitive with them. Of course, when I drilled down into this, I found out that altogether between the 3 of them, they have about 30 contestants total, and there's plenty of contestants to go around. But let's talk about what we mean by political capital. Political capital are people who can help you smooth over political problems or who can help you achieve policy or other ends that you need. In the case of the multiple Miss Native American USAs, or I'm not sure, they're not all called the same thing, but in that case, the kind of help that you would need in terms of smoothing out the competition and maybe getting everybody to collaborate and work together in order to get more young women to come to these things and get their scholarships might be somebody from each of the tribes that send young women to more than one of these events. For example, the Navajo tribe sends young women from its community to all 3 of these events. The The volunteers with political capital might be people from the Navajo Nation who are willing to convene a meeting or go one-on-one and have conversations with the people running these other pageants, just to suggest that there are so many girls that could be served by these works, and why don't we come together and maybe form an association of Native American pageants and work together to lever our marketing dollars to get it out across the nation. Instead of being competitors, become collaborators. The person who can help facilitate that would be somebody who has political capital. And so that's another way you can use volunteers. If you have a particular problem, you just ask yourself, who is the best person to be the intermediary between our group and whichever other group the problem has? And then you go ask them to step in and help you in this way. Once they say yes, voila, they are a volunteer now. You are not paying them, although you could pay somebody. But in this case, we're talking about volunteers bringing political capital to the table. Finally, our last kind of volunteer capital is cultural capital. And by that, I mean somebody who's got a working knowledge of the culture, so well that you would go to that person if you needed somebody to help you find your way around a new community or introduce you to the important people in a certain business sector. I'm going to play you a little video, assuming I can get it to play. If not, I might have to go on to YouTube to find this. But this is a young woman who has cultural capital in a certain community. And if you wanted to do, for example, a fundraiser for kids based around video gaming, or you wanted to start a video gaming program for kids after school or whatever, and you needed somebody to help you around the culture, this young woman would be key. Here we go. I love it. Video inside video. It's taking a minute, but hopefully it will load okay. Here we go.
After years of playing video games with my brother, going to LAN parties, creating our own LAN team, I'd like to think that I'm more passionate about gaming than anything else. I grew up riding horses in South Africa and competing as a dressage rider. I think that's what first ignited my competitive nature. Now I find myself immersed in another community, an exciting one, and I love it. There's always this feeling of challenge and friendship, and being surrounded by people that think like me, people that see gaming as more than just a game. It's our sport, and it's our community. It's full of trial and failure, victory and loss, fans and fanatics, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Gaming may just be entertainment to some, but to me, it's a passion I can't live without. I'm known as Bish. I'm a gamer. This is my character, and these are my colors.
So, again, cultural capital. You don't have to have capital in the sense of money for any of these kinds of capital: social capital, human capital, political capital, cultural capital. But when you find that you need help like this, why not call on a volunteer who is in the right place and has the right cred to do this? I think that's it for right now, and I will see you on the boards. Have a great rest of your weekend.